Scars of silence. Emily is the only one who survived an encounter with a maniac who called silence a gift. But even after escaping from his house, she understands. The real nightmare is not over yet. The whispers continue to haunt her. Emily is in a dark room. The dim light illuminates her pale face, her hands clasped together, shaking as if she is trying to hold reality together. Her gaze is frozen, looking somewhere across space, as if something she cannot explain is opening up before her. The emotions on her face tell it all. Fear, confusion, despair. Emily is the only one who survived. Her story is terrifying, confusing, and thought-provoking. Most said it was all a coincidence, but deep down, she knew it was silence. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? The story of Emily, the sole survivor of a terrifying nightmare where silence turns into ominous whispers and a dark reality that reflects her fears and fight for survival against an invisible pursuer. Emily walks down a deserted dark street, her footsteps echoing in the quiet of the night. The dim light from the street lamps flickers, creating an uneasy feeling around her. She walks quickly, her cheerfulness laced with nervousness, caused by the vague but palpable tension in the air. It started that night when she was walking home. Everything around her seemed normal, but at some point the silence became too loud. The feeling that something was wrong haunted her, although she couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Emily glances over her shoulder and finds that there is no one behind her. But this emptiness is even more frightening. From it, a whisper emerges. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? We are close. She convinced herself it was the wind, the playlist in her head, or just her tired imagination. But how could she explain something that only got louder? Once home, she quickly closes the door behind her, as if trying to lock out the whispers from outside. But there is a note on the floor with the terrifying words, "Did you hear them whisper?" Her hands begin to shake. She feels as if the violence of silence is already inside. The story of Emily, the sole survivor of a terrifying nightmare, where silence turns into ominous whispers and a dark reality that reflects her fears and fight for survival against an invisible pursuer. Emily turns on the light in the living room and notices that the lamp is flickering. This faint flickering light seems to warn of the approach of something inexplicable. And then she hears a barely perceptible creak behind her. Emily suddenly realized that she would not get much sleep that night. She felt someone's presence. Even the draft felt ominous. But she did not understand what it was until she felt a rough hand on her neck. She turns around. The cold seeps through the walls, making her shudder. Mirrors are scattered around the room, fragments of which reflect her frightened face. On the floor are old newspaper clippings with news of unsolved crimes. When she woke up, she was surrounded by mirrors, traces of a maniac, symbols of something greater. The reflections seemed to tease, increasing her fear. And then he appeared. A figure emerges from the darkness. His face is hidden by a mask of shards of mirrors, which seem to reflect the darkness of the human soul. He spoke of silence as a precious gift, but for her, every word he said became a fateful torture. The maniac approaches, but this time there is determination in Emily's trembling eyes. She notices a shard from one of the broken mirrors, slowly reaches for it, and begins to cut the ropes. The story of Emily, the sole survivor of a terrifying nightmare, where silence turns into ominous whispers and a dark reality that reflects her fears and fight for survival against an invisible pursuer. Freed, Emily slowly stands up, trying not to make a sound. The camera shows her tense face. She knows she only has one chance. She was ready to run, but the signs in her thoughts told her one wrong step, and she would become another victim. The future, like silence, stood nearby. The maniac stands with his back to her, talking to the mirror. There is a calm anger on his face, as if he hears a voice from the void. He whispered to someone in the mirror, perhaps to the same silence that haunted her. Freed, Emily grabs a wooden stick and strikes him. He falls to the floor, not motionless, but temporarily incapacitated. She runs out of the house, her legs struggling to keep up with her thoughts. Emily runs through the dense forest, lit only by the rare moonlight. With every step, the whispers grow louder. "You won't run away. You're already one of us." The light of a police car suddenly breaks her out of her nightmare. Emily's scream cuts through the night, her running slows, and she stumbles, but manages to reach safety. Emily sits in the small room of the police station. Her eyes barely move. The silence hangs over her shoulders again, but in a different context. They assured her that she was out of danger, that it was all over. But somewhere inside, Emily knew the truth. She picks up a cup of coffee. Her fingers tremble slightly. Scratched into the bottom of the cup are the words, "Did you hear them whisper?" The stack of papers on the table shift slightly in the air from the fan, which sounds like an ancient echo in her head. It feels like the silence has closed in a circle. The echo of the voices has become a part of her. Emily tries to convince herself that this place is safe, but the whispers continue. "You are one of us." This story does not have a happy ending. Emily survived, but the enemy did not disappear. Silence no longer means calm. It means an invisible pursuer catching up with her. How many more victims will reject this whisper? And how many of them wondered if they heard it now? Can you hear us? You are one of us too.